Hi, I'm Amelia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Building a Better You. Now, today we're going to be reading from the book of Deuteronomy. We don't hear too much about that, but it holds a lot of good information for us, and it also tells us about things that we can still use in our everyday life. And it also is going to tell us about trusting in God, which is what we've been speaking about, unshakable faith, and so forth. So today we're going to be reading from Deuteronomy. We're going to cover three different chapters, parts of three different chapters, chapter 5, 6, and 8. So we're going to start with chapter 5, and I have that under the heading of the Ten Commandments. So we're going to read through part of that, and then we're going to discuss it. Chapter 5 of Deuteronomy, verse 1. And Moses called all Israel and said unto them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that you may learn them, keep them, and do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. Now, what is a covenant? It's a final binding agreement. And what are his statutes? Statutes are laws. It's just another word that they use for law. Now let's continue on. I'm going to skip to verse 4 and let's read that. The Lord talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. But I, this is Moses talking to the people, but I stood between the Lord and you at that time to show you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid by reason of the fire and would not go up into the mount. So Moses is telling them, I'm going to tell you what the word said. And first of all, God told him, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And then Moses proceeded to let them know, reminding them where God had brought them from. And now he's going to read them the 10 Commandments. These are the 10 Commandments of God, which he is going to read and explain to them that this is what they must live by. Thou shalt have none other gods before me. And that means none. None, no time, no way, no shape, and no form. Because just like it says in verse 8, Thou shalt not make thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them. So that's telling you, it can't be any clearer than that. There is only one God. And he's telling you, God's saying, don't create anything other than worshiping the one and only God. Don't bow down to them. Don't serve them. Now here's why. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. A jealous God, visiting the iniquity of thy fathers upon the children of third and fourth generation. That means all your children, their children, and any of their children that hate the Lord. But on the other hand, he's saying, I will show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. And that means, don't be just using God's name for any reason. under any circumstance. His name is to be held above, in awe, in worship. And he's saying, you will be held accountable. He's not going to let that pass. He's not going to look at that as a mistake. He will hold you guilty. And in verse 12, which it says, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee. Keep it pure. The Sabbath is a pure day. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. And in it, in that Sabbath day, thou shalt not work. Now it's saying not your sons, not your daughters, not your maidservants, your manservants, none of your animals, nothing or anyone is supposed to do anything. Anything that, not even a stranger, that it says that it's within your gates, but it could be somebody visiting or whatever. But the point is that 7th day is to be held as a Sabbath day. And look at verse 15. It says, God's reminding you, remember, you were a servant once. This doesn't just apply to you because it's your house. Not your servant, your manservant, your maidservant. Nobody is supposed to work. Remember when I brought you out of the land of Egypt? Through that mighty hand and by a stretched out arm? Therefore, I command thee to keep the Sabbath day. Very plain, very clear. Telling you how to maintain the Sabbath day. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which I have given. So as long as you're honoring your mother and your father, your life will be good, your days will be prolonged, and things will go well with you. Thou shalt not kill, that's self-explanatory. Neither shalt thou commit adultery, neither shalt thou steal, that's self-explanatory. Neither shalt thou bear false witness against thy neighbor. Now you know, that means don't be going around spreading rumors about your neighbor. If you don't like them, don't try to say things about them that other people won't like them as well. That's bearing false witness. You see that every day. You hear it on the news every day. They're always making up stuff about somebody, talking about somebody. You see it all the time. Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife, nor shalt thou covet. And that means to desire anything that is thy neighbor's. Doesn't matter what it is. Anything in their house, their field. Anything. Don't be jealous. Coveting means to be jealous, to want something that somebody else has. Anything that is thy neighbor's. These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount in the midst of the fire. And he did it in a great voice. And he wrote them in 2 tables of stone, and delivered them unto Moses. And that's how Moses came to tell them the 10 Commandments, read them to them, and actually tell them the purpose of them. So there would be no misunderstanding. You can't say, oh, I didn't know what that meant. You know what it means to be coveted. You know what it means to be jealous. You know what it means to talk about somebody behind their back. Make up things about them. It's all explained right here. That's why you have to read the word continuously. Because you can apply everything we read here that happened thousands of years ago, it can apply to us today. So after Moses had read the 10 Commandments and explained it to them and told them what it meant, now that the people understood, they agreed. They agreed. And then God told Moses, let's go to verse 30. God told Moses, but as for you, meaning Moses, stand there here with me. Now he told Moses to tell them to go to their tents. It was over. Go to their tents. But he told Moses, as for you, you stay here with me. And I will speak unto thee all the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which you, meaning Moses, shall teach them, that they may do them in the land which I give them to possess. So now Moses is separate from the people. They've all gone to their tents, but God's given him the last final words on his instruction. Now let's go to chapter 6, and this part is under, I put it under, the love of the Lord thy God. Now let's go to chapter 6 and start there. We're going to read verse 1 through 6, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit. Now, these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded you to teach, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess it, that thou might fear the Lord thy God, keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee. And that means thy sons, thy daughters, all the days of thy life, that they may be prolonged. So that's simply saying, as long as you follow God's commandments, as long as you live by his word, it says fear the Lord. And we spoke about that. Hold him above everything and everybody. Keep his statutes and commandments. Now let's continue on. It says, hear, O Israel, observe it to do, that it may be well with thee, that ye may increase mightily, as God thy Father has promised. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the Lord. There's only one Lord, one God. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart. So it's there, that's all it's saying. As long as you do this, know that there's only one God, no images, nobody gets any of the worship, any of the praise, except our Lord and Savior. Now let's go to verse 12. Now verse 12, I picked that because this part tells you, don't forget where you came from. Beware, lest thou forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, who brought you out of the house of bondage. Don't forget that. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God and serve him, and shalt swear by his name. Ye shall not go after other gods, not the gods of people which are around you, for the Lord thy God is a jealous God. There it is again. Now it tells you what will happen. Lest the anger of the Lord thy God be kindled against you and destroy thee from the face of the earth. You shall not tempt the Lord your God as you tempted him in Massah. You did it once. Don't do it again. He's telling you he's a jealous God. You don't want to bring him to anger. Because what does it say? He will destroy thee from the face of the earth. You shall diligently, and that means with all your heart, mind, and soul, diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his testimonies and his statutes, which he hath commanded thee. And thou shalt do that which is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest goest in and possess the good land which the Lord swore unto our fathers. to cast out all thy enemies. God will cast out your enemies. When you follow his word, he sees you. He knows you're following from your heart. He will cast out your enemies as he has spoken. So that's all. It's kind of self-explanatory, but the point is, you can read it, you can see it, you can understand it, but the whole point is to do it. I don't want God mad at me, because he can do stuff nobody else can do. I mean, good or bad, he can do it. Now, you may think you could do something or think you can make something work and try to manipulate people and things, but no matter what we try, it can always be superseded by God. And like it said in verse 18, if you do that which is good and right in the sight of the Lord, it will be well with thee. So, that being said, now we're going to go over to chapter 8. And I put that under the heading of God's mercies in the wilderness. Now again, these verses are going to tell us why did God even put them in the wilderness all that time? But it's also going to show his mercy even though they were in the wilderness. Now we're going to go quickly from verse 1 through 6 and talk about that for a couple minutes, and then we're going to proceed. All the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. Then it says in verse 2, again it's reminding you, thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God had led thee 40 years in the wilderness. Now, he did that. Why? To humble thee, and to prove thee, and to know what was really in thine heart, whether thou would keep his commandments or not. That's why he put them there. And he humbled thee, and he suffered thee to be hungry. But then, here's the merciful part. He fed them with manna. They didn't even know what it was, nor did their fathers. But he did that he might make thee know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord. That's what you live by. Thy raiment, meaning thy clothing, waxed not old upon thee, neither did thy foot swell for 40 years. Now let's stop right there. First of all, your clothes didn't get old, nothing got torn, your feet didn't swell, your sandals didn't break. I can't even walk for 40 minutes, let alone 40 years. How could anybody keep your clothes from ripping? How could anybody keep them from getting old? Keep your feet from swelling, your sandals never broke, and you walked for 40 years. How does that happen? Because God made it happen. Thou shalt also consider in thine heart that as a man chastises his son, so the Lord chastises thee. So if you have children, you're going to chastise them because you want them to do what's best for them. But at the same time, you take care of them, you still love them. God still loves us, he still takes care of us. We do so many things wrong, just like they did. That's why he put them out there, to bring them down to reality, to humble them, to make them know that nothing can be done without him. That's why you have to keep his commandments. That's why verse 6 says, therefore shalt thou keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. That's all it's saying. Walk in my ways and I will protect you. No matter how it looks, no matter how it seems, trust in the Lord. Now let's jump quickly down to verse 11, and I categorize that as warnings against pride. Now we speak about pride a lot, and we see it in our everyday lives. So I want to go through this and come back and speak about this for a minute, because this is very relevant to us today. And we're going to start in verse 11. Excuse me. Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God. There's that word again. Don't forget him, because you know what's going to happen. And don't forget him, his commandments, his judgments, his statutes, which I command thee this day. Let's remember. Now you've eaten, you're full, you've built goodly houses, and you're dwelling therein, and you're prospering with their herds and the flocks. Everything's multiplying, silver and gold, and all that thou hast is multiplied. So that means now we're getting rich, we're accomplishing what we want, we're getting the status that we want. Everything is working our way. Look at verse 14. It says, then in thine heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God, who brought you out of Egypt, who brought you out of the house of bondage. You forgot the God who led you through the great wilderness with all the serpents and scorpions and the drought that he still gave you water out of the rock when he fed you with the manna in the wilderness. You forgot all that, and you said in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand has gotten me this wealth. Wrong. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God. Because all that stuff, what's it say in verse 18? The Lord thy God, it is he that giveth thee the power to even get the wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he swore unto our fathers. That's the pride we see today. Everybody's talking about what they did and what they accomplished, but it all came from God. Verse 19 says, and it shall be, if thou do at all forget the Lord thy God, and walk after other gods, or serve them, or worship them, I testify against you this day that ye shall perish. So he's giving you fair warning. It can't be any clearer. You can't go up against God. That's a losing battle. And he's letting you know, as the nations which were before you, the Lord destroyed them, so shall you perish. So shall you perish. Why? Because you would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord. Can't get any clearer. I understand it. Do you understand it? It's perfectly clear to me. Now he's reminding you of all the wonderful things he did. He's telling them of all the wonderful things he did, and they're forgetting it and talking about what they did and what they accomplished. These verses remind us of all the things and blessings that God gives us. He gives us all kinds of blessings, all kinds of gifts, talents. Don't say what you did. You didn't even know how to do it. Well, I'm smart and I figured this out. But who gave you the mind to figure it out? If you trace everything back, it all comes back to God anyway. And it also reminds you of the consequences. So I don't care what you say or how you say it or what you think. He's telling you what the consequences are going to be. You will perish. Maybe not this year, maybe not 5 years from now. But it's not going to be lasting forever. Nothing lasts forever but what God gives us, because He controls our length of time. And we've got to learn to acknowledge where our talents and gifts come from. You've got to learn to acknowledge it. It comes from God and nobody else. Not you, not your teachers, not your instructors. If you're a good swimmer, if you're a good dancer, a musician, whatever your talents are, God still gave them to you. So you've got to learn to be able to give credit where credit is due. My gift is poetry and, teaching, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. And every day I say, thank you, Lord. I don't know where some of the words come from. And that brings me to the poem that I wrote. And I'm going to share that with you today. And it's entitled, My Gift from God. And this is all about me. You fill my heart and mind with these words. What else could it be? It's a blessing and a gift sent directly from you to me. Sometimes the words just come to me as I lay there thinking of you, remembering all the wonderful things no one but you could do. Sometimes you come in and take over my mind and the words just flow like a stream. I just lay here and watch as the words formulate. It's like watching yourself in a dream. Oh, I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong. I feel like a musician creating a song. Lord, I am so thankful that this gift is mine and I can share it with others at any given time. I love what I do. I thank the Lord every day for what He's given me. It took me a while to recognize that maybe you've got talents and things that you don't even know you have yet. But my point is, if you have talent, if you have whatever gifts God's given you, acknowledge it. Let people know. I'm letting you know. Let people know what you've got, that it came from God. Read these chapters over to yourself. Put yourself in the place of back in the day. Look at all He did for Moses and the Israelites. They complained and grumbled the whole time, but even though God made it uncomfortable for them, He still took care of them. And the point is, you say, well, I don't know, I haven't been to church, or I haven't done this, and I haven't done that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. God's not mad about that. He's just waiting for you to come on over. He's just waiting for you to start reading. That's why we have these conversations every week. That's why we study these verses, so we can understand what they mean, so we can relate them in our own lives. So many of you have talent you may not recognize, but if there's something you're feeling, look at these verses, read these verses, think about it. Where did it come from? Go back in your mind and trace it. Well, my teacher taught me this, and this one showed me how to do that. But then who created them? Don't you see? It's a chain reaction that all comes from God. So now I'm going to ask you, well, if you have gifts, how thankful are you to God for the gifts He gave you? Do you thank Him every day? I thanked Him when I got up, because we couldn't do any of this stuff if He didn't wake us up. None of our friends can wake us up. None of our family can wake us up. You've got to learn to recognize every little thing, no matter how small, it's a gift from God. And my closing words to you today are, where you are today isn't where you've always been. God had to bring you from somewhere to get you here. think about it. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.